Okie dokie, guys. Welcome to the next lecture. You're in for a treat, and I'm so sorry, but that is the only joke I've got for this. It's gonna go completely downhill from here. So we are going to talk about the urinary system, and what even is urine? For the record, that is pee. There are 8 primary functions of the kidneys, which the kidneys are going to be the key players here when we talk about the urinary system. First is going to be the regulation of blood ionic composition. You can think of this as being regulating sodium, potassium, calcium chloride, not calcium chloride, but calcium and chloride, and phosphate within your blood. Because the kidneys are going to filter your blood, that is their primary kind of goal, is to be filtering your blood constantly. It's very important. We are also going to regulate the pH of your blood, and this is going to be by secreting hydrogen or conserving bicarbonate in order to make it more acidic or more basic. Excuse me. We are going to regulate our blood volume. This is going to be by conserving or eliminating water. By adding more water or allowing more water to stay, you increase your blood volume. By taking it out, you decrease your blood volume. And this is an important thing to maintain, which you probably never really thought your body had to do. But it does need to make sure that the volume of your blood does not become too much or too little. We need to regulate our blood pressure through our kidneys, and this is by using an enzyme called renin. We need to maintain our blood osmolarity, and just to kind of reiterate, osmolarity is the measure of the total number of dissolved particles per liter of a solution. And then we also need to produce hormones from our kidneys. Our kidneys do produce calcitriol and erythropoietin. And we've talked about calcitriol before, and that is going to be the active form of vitamin D, but we haven't talked about erythropoietin, but this is going to stimulate the production of red blood cells. It's a very important hormone. We're going to regulate our blood glucose levels, not dissimilar to the liver. The kidneys can use glutamine and synthesize new glucose molecules. Remember, that is sugar. We're talking about sugar there. And last but not least, we are going to excrete the waste and foreign substances that we don't need from the body. We do need to talk about 2 terms that commonly get mixed up or used incorrectly, and that is elimination versus excretion. Elimination is the removal of bulk solid waste from the body. This can also be called defecation. This is that removal of feces. Excretion is a different process where you are only filtering blood. Excretion is not necessarily urinating or peeing. I want to make sure you know that. If you put peeing as an answer, it is technically incorrect because it's not just that act of urinating. It is the process of filtering blood, and urine is sort of the byproduct of that. All right, moving into a little bit of anatomy with a little bit of physiology kind of on the side. So this will actually help you when it comes to lab, if you want to kind of pay attention to this. First and foremost, you have 2 kidneys. If you put your hands on your back as if you were giving someone attitude, so putting both your hands on kind of your lower back a little bit, so not quite touching your butt, but just above and kind of below your ribs. Your kidneys are going to be right there. The purpose of your kidneys is to filter and cleanse circulating blood. They are retroperitoneal, which means that it is referring to their position in your abdomen, where it is posterior to the peritoneum of the abdominal cavity. So remember that peritoneum is going to be that sac that surrounds your abdominal cavity. Your kidneys are sitting outside of that sac, which is kind of interesting in my opinion. You have renal arteries and renal veins, and respectively they are going to supply blood to your kidneys or carry blood away from the kidneys. So arteries are going to bring blood in, veins are going to carry that filtered blood out. Next, you have your ureters. Your ureters are going to be where the waste that you have now collected from that filtered blood is going to be released out into. The ureters are going to travel down to the urinary bladder, where it is going to collect until it fills up to the point that you feel the need to urinate. From the urinary bladder, we are going to exit the body through the urethra. The urethra is going to exit the body from the urinary bladder, and that is the tube in which you pee out of. Inside of the kidney, if we cut it in half, you're going to see a few things that are very, very important and can also cause a few problems if they get backed up. So you have the renal cortex and the renal medulla. These two structures are specifically going to be what filters your blood. They do act as literally filters. They kind of have this fan-like appearance. They are very, very important. The renal pyramid is going to be what collects urine from the outer layers of the kidney, and then you also have renal columns, which are going to be in between the renal pyramids, and you can see these labeled out over here on our little kidney here. What I want to make sure that you know is that this larger structure in the middle, that is the renal pelvis, so in yellow. That is the funnel-like structure there in the middle. It is going to funnel urine into the ureters. So remember that urine is going to be that waste. We are trying to get rid of that waste. It's going to funnel it down into the ureter. Each kidney is going to filter 1,000 liters of blood a day. And you might be saying, okay, but Rachel, I know I don't have 1,000 liters of blood in my body. You are correct. And very clever of you to figure that out. What this means is that that blood is filtering over and over and over. So once it goes through all the way once, it goes through again and again and again and again until just about 1,000 liters a day are filtered. So there's a lot of blood passing through your kidneys all the time, every day. Per minute, you have about 1,200 milliliters being filtered. This is also called renal blood flow, and this is the average. If it's more, that might not be a good thing. If it's less, that also might not be a good thing. Alrighty guys, so we are going to now talk about nephrons. What I want you to know about nephrons is literally just this first little bit right here, and that you have about 1 million of them, and they are microscopic filters that are going to make up your kidney. All right, you don't really have to know this. It's not necessary. Next, we're going to talk about your ureters. Again, these are going to transport urine from the renal pelvis to the urinary bladder, and they use peristaltic contractions. Now, I've alluded to peristaltic contractions before, but we will talk about them more in the next section when we talk about digestion. But a lot of parts of your body are going to use peristalsis, and this is one of the first ones that we're going to talk about. Peristalsis is going to be this process of relaxation and contraction. This is going to cause whatever is moving through that area to be pushed down or pushed over, however it is being moved. So we are moving that urine via peristaltic contractions. Do know that your ureters are between 25 and 30 centimeters long, and they are also retroperitoneal, just like your kidneys. Your urinary bladder, however, is not going to be retroperitoneal. It's going to sit kind of at the very bottom of your abdominal cavity. It is a hollow distendable muscular organ that is posterior to your pubic symphysis. And if you need to remember where your pubic symphysis is, remember it's that little area where your pelvis comes together in the front and you have that little bit of cartilage connecting them. When your bladder is full, it is more spherical. When it is empty, it ends up collapsing, and this is all thanks to rugae. And remember that rugae are going to be those wrinkles on the inside of whatever organ it is that we are talking about. But you are going to see rugae a few times before lecture is up. Your bladder capacity is going to be somewhere around 700 to 800 milliliters. This is different for everybody. If you're smaller, you're not going to have as much availability to fill that up. If you're larger, you might have a bigger bladder. If you have a condition, you might have a bigger bladder. If you're male, you probably have a bigger bladder. Females naturally have smaller bladders. That is due to having a uterus. And then we have this term here, the trigon. This is where we're going to have this cute little triangle formed, making up the urethral openings and the floor of the bladder and the internal urethral orifice. So it's just kind of combining all of our little holes here that we have. These are the layers of the bladder wall. We have the inner mucosa, the middle muscular layer, and the outer connective tissue layer, which is going to be continuous with the fibrous capsule surrounding it and the peritoneum. So it is sort of connected to that layer that is surrounding your abdominal cavity. Something interesting about this graphic that I want to point out, this structure here, just underneath, inferior to our bladder, that is the prostate. And you can see how your urethra, if you're a male, is going to pass directly through that prostate. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides, as well as when we talk about the reproductive system. Components of urine. First and foremost, we have water. Most of your urine is going to be water. If you're really well hydrated, your urine should be very clear, maybe just slightly off clear, a little bit yellow. If you are less hydrated, this means that you're going to have extremely dark and also very pungent urine because there's not as much water to dilute it down. You're also going to have urea, ions such as sodium chloride, potassium, calcium, and hydrogen. And you're also going to have something called creatinine. This is a product of muscle use. So if you work out a lot, chances are you have a lot of creatinine in your urine, especially if you supplement creatinine with like protein shakes and things like that. Creatinine is something that you can take if you are trying to build muscle. I don't always suggest doing that kind of thing, but you do you. It's your life, it's your body, you do you. Chances are you just literally just pee it out though. You're kind of wasting your time and money by doing that, in my opinion. Same with protein. You're just sort of peeing it out. The other thing that you're going to have within urine, because it is a waste, is going to be any toxins that your kidneys are clearing out. And I know I've talked about this before, but anything in excess in your body is something that can become toxic. If you drink too much water, that can become toxic in your body. If you eat too much of something very specific, maybe like candy, sugar can become toxic in your body. Anything that you have in excess that you take into your body, it can become toxic. On the other spectrum of this, there's nothing that naturally cleanses your body that's outside of your body. So your kidneys and your liver specifically have that purpose to cleanse your body and make sure that things stay in homeostasis. If you take some type of magic thing that you drink, a weird fruit or vegetable puree that claims that it's going to cleanse your body, literally all it's going to be doing, instead of taking out toxins, it's going to make you have diarrhea or maybe urinate a lot or maybe throw up. Any toxins in your body that aren't being gotten rid of by your liver or your kidneys, you should probably see a doctor instead of trying some kind of snake oil product. Other components of your urine include drugs and bilirubin. Bilirubin, remember, well, maybe not remember yet because we haven't necessarily talked about it, but bilirubin is going to be a byproduct of your liver. And when it comes to drugs in your urine, if you are a female and you take birth control, you urinate quite a bit of that product, as well as if you've ever taken, pain medication, so like aspirin or Tylenol or anything like that. Whenever you are kind of done using it, if you will, you urinate it out. Characteristics of normal urine, we can look at volume, color, turbidity, odor, pH, and specific gravity, which is basically just density. And the things that are normal is going to be eliminating 1 to 2 liters in a 24-hour period. But again, this varies, depends on how hydrated you are, what you're doing. You could be working outside in the hot sun and drink 5 bottles of water and only pee once. Meanwhile, if you were inside and drank 5 bottles of water, but you're very cool, you're not sweating, you're probably going to pee like 3 or 4 times, right? When it comes to color, you can see the last slide, see what's kind of more normal as opposed to abnormal. Turbidity is whether or not urine, when it is freshly voided, is transparent. It will become more cloudy upon standing, and that is normal. The odor of urine can be mildly aromatic and will become more ammonia-like upon standing. When it comes to people who have diabetes, their urine is going to be very full of sugar, and thus they are going to have more of a fruity odor to their urine. Your pH of your urine is going to range between 4.6 and 8, so it is going to be on the more acidic side. And the density of your urine, the ratio of weight of volume of substance to weight of volume of distilled water. So we are just comparing it to distilled water. Urination can also be called micturition or voiding. Those terms are all synonymous. When your bladder reaches somewhere between 200 and 400 milliliters, there are stretch receptors within your bladder that are going to signal your brain that you need to pee. When it comes to the actual action of urinating, the flow of urine through your urethra is going to stimulate muscles that are going to contract and squeeze the bladder. If you remember from the very beginning of this class, we talked about various homeostasis loops. If there is an event that is occurring and it intensifies until it is over, which is what urinating is, if you said that that is a positive homeostasis loop, you would be correct. So do know that urinating is a positive homeostasis loop. We do want to talk about the differences between male and female anatomy. We are going to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the reproductive system, but there is also a difference in male and female urinary systems. So the first thing I want to point out, and I do want you to know all 4 of these, I think it's very important. Some of them kind of are a little bit redundant, but just bear with me. Women are going to have smaller bladders due to the presence of the uterus taking up space in that lower abdomen. So women are not going to have the ability to hold as much urine. Also, when you are pregnant, that becomes even more difficult. When it comes to the difference between the urethra exits, there is a big difference between males and females as well. Females are going to have a substantially shorter urethra, which is about 3 to 4 centimeters. It's also going to be positioned much closer to the anus and the vagina, which is going to increase the risk of a UTI. So you have bacteria and various other things going on with the vagina and with the anus. That close to your urethra, bacteria can get in there and cause a UTI. That's why females are more prone to UTIs. When it comes to males, the urethra is used in 2 instances. 1 for urinating and 2 for the ejection of semen for reproductive purposes. That is due to the presence of a penis. Another difference that males and females have is going to be that men have a prostate, which is going to surround the urethra just inferior to the bladder. Make sure that you know, both for the test as well as on a personal note, that females, naturally born females, are not going to have a prostate. They physically do not have one. They are not born with one. That is not something that happens. Naturally born biological males will have prostates. This is a gland that is inferior to the bladder, and it serves reproductive purposes, but it can cause urinary problems. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the reproductive system, but make sure you know that that's a big one. The fourth and final point to make is that the urethra exits from the tip of the penis in males. This kind of goes along with the second point, but I kind of see it as being a fourth point that's kind of its own thing. Males have a penis, females don't. Males are going to have a much longer urethra than a female. It's about 20 centimeters compared to a female's 3 to 4 centimeters. And again, the urethra for males is going to serve 2 purposes, and that is urine and semen. Now, one of the things that I've seen on previous tests from students in this class is that they think that comparatively females have a uterus as males have a prostate. That is not a comparison to make. The uterus is for reproductive purposes. The prostate is also for reproductive purposes. But just because females have a uterus does not mean it's comparable to males having a prostate. They are not a similar structure. They are not the same in any capacity. They are completely different, and women have a smaller bladder due to their uterus. Males have a prostate, which can cause problems with urinating, but it serves reproductive purposes as well. So don't compare them like, well, women have a uterus and males have a prostate. That is not something to compare when talking about the difference between the urinary system. Adding on a little bit more to the last slide when we're talking about the different parts that are a little bit different from male to female, let's talk a little bit about the male urethra. It is going to be split up into 3 parts. The first is going to be the prostatic urethra. It's going to pass through, not the urethra, it's going to pass through the prostate. You have the intermediate or membranous urethra, which is going to be just this little area that passes through the deep muscles of the perineum, this little guy right here, and then the spongy urethra, which is going to pass through the penis. So the part that you probably think of most when you think of the urethra, it's just going to be that tube that is going through the penis. And it is called spongy because it is surrounded by spongy tissue, and we'll talk about that when we talk about reproductive system. Moving on to diuretics. Diuretics are going to be substances or products that are going to help you urinate more. It's going to increase your ability to urinate. It's going to pull more water out of your body. to help you rid the body of salt and other fluids. If you need to medically monitor your blood volume, if something is going wrong with that, typically they'll put you on diuretics. This should help keep your blood volume down. So this is going to treat things like blood pressure, swollen tissue, heart failure, and kidney disease as well by monitoring your blood pressure and your blood volume. A few things that are natural diuretics is Nigella sativa, alcohol, dandelion, ginger, hibiscus, parsley, and caffeine. If you have ever drinking a cup of coffee, chances are you know that you have to pee or use the restroom. Usually, typically, after you drink caffeine, that is because it is a diuretic. Talking about kidney failure, nearly 50% are due to diabetes. This is because of leaking proteins due to damage of high blood pressure, due to high blood pressure. This is kind of an unfortunate thing revolving around diabetes. If you can treat it, please do. Otherwise, it could lead to kidney failure. If your kidneys become unable to filter your own blood, you may be put on something called dialysis. This is where the blood is pumped through a semi-permeable tubing outside of your body that is immersed in a bath of clean fluid. And as the blood moves through the tubing, wastes are going to diffuse out into the fluid, and thus filtered blood will move back into your body. This is not going to be a long-term fix for kidney failure. In the end, what you would want to see is potentially a donated kidney, or that kidney that is acting up healing itself if it can. But dialysis is not something that is sustainable. You can only live on dialysis for a certain period of time before it does not help your body anymore. Do keep in mind that you can live with a single functioning kidney, so it is very possible to donate a kidney if need be. You can live with one, and so can the recipient that you give it to. Another little kind of fun thing is foamy urine can be the cause of fast urination. Occasionally foamy urine is normal. If it is persistent though, and this is kind of an important thing to always check the toilet once you've used it, kind of no matter what, it's important to see what's coming out of your body. If persistently you have foamy urine, that could mean that there is excessive protein in your urine, and that could mean that you have something bigger going on that is not a good thing. Let's talk about renal failure. Renal failure occurs when the kidneys cannot perform their excretory, try saying that 5 times fast, functions needed to maintain homeostasis, so they are not filtering properly. You have chronic renal failure, which is where you have kidney functions deteriorating gradually. The progression can be slowed, but unfortunately the condition is not reversible. You have acute renal failure, which means that your kidney function deteriorates very quickly, as opposed to chronic. Acute renal failure, the recovery of partial or complete function is possible if patients survive the initial incident, but the survival rate is around 50%, and that is even with supportive treatment. Moving on to kidney stones, remember I mentioned that those filters within your kidney can cause problems, and that is if you develop a kidney stone. They are incredibly painful. I've never had one, but I had a boyfriend who did, and as he was passing it, I swear it was like he was giving birth. It was excruciating, and I really can't imagine being a male going through that, because there's a lot more urethra that it has to go through as opposed to a female. It'd still be quite painful for a female, but males have 20 centimeters of urethra that one of these stones has to go through, and that sounds horrible. What kidney stones are masses of calcium, phosphorus, uric acid, and protein crystals that are going to form these solid masses. What happens is they collect in the renal pelvis. Small ones can usually be passed, but really large ones can block up the urine flow, which can, if untreated, cause kidney failure. So if you have kind of to the sides but lower back pain, and it's just really hard to pee, or you're having blood in your urine or something like that, make sure you see a doctor right away. Don't let pain go unnoticed. You should always try to take care of yourself, and I'll get off my soapbox and move on to the next slide. UTIs, as we said before, they are more common in women due to the placement of the urethra close to the vagina and the anus. Normally, you'll find UTIs within the urethra or the bladder. More severe UTIs can move up into the ureters and into the kidney. What some of the symptoms are for UTIs is back pain, nausea, vomiting, cramps, fever, an intense need to urinate, and then burning when urinating. Things that can increase the chances of you getting a UTI is sex, odds, hygiene, or if you maybe are just more prone to infections. So possibly you have a lower immune system. This can also cause UTIs. What UTIs really are, and you can see from this little illustration over to the side, is that they are bacterial infections. So this bacteria is going to go up through the urethra and find a nice little home within the bladder. What really helps get rid of or prevent UTIs is going to be urinating. So antibiotics or cranberry juice, some type of diuretic as well. It is going to make it more difficult for bacteria to cling to the walls of the urethra if you urinate a lot. They cannot hold on, as well as it's not really a habitable environment due to the pH of urine. One of the things to prevent UTIs after sex is to always urinate after you have sex. This is not going to do anything for sperm that may be in the vagina, but it can definitely help prevent a UTI. During sex, there's a lot of fluids, various things going on, various things touching other things, and bacteria can find its way up into the urethra. By urinating, you are making it to where that bacteria is going to be flushed out. Last but not least, we are going to talk about urinary incontinence. This is going to be a lack of voluntary control over your urination. There are 4 types of urinary incontinence that I want you to know. Stress incontinence, which is going to be most common in young and middle-aged females. It is a weakness of deep muscles of the pelvic floor. This is where you have urinating, or at least a little bit of urine coming out, when sneezing, laughing, exercising, due to pregnancy, etc., etc., there's a little bit of a leak. The next is urge incontinence. This is the most common in older people. It is abrupt and intense needs to urinate, followed by involuntary loss of urine. So suddenly you have to pee and you absolutely cannot hold it. Urination of the urinary bladder wall can be caused by an infection or kidney stones, stroke, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injury, or anxiety. Next is overflow incontinence. This is leakage of small amounts of urine caused by blockage or weak contractions. It is when urine flow is blocked and the bladder will become overfilled. The pressure inside will increase until small amounts are going to dribble out. The last is going to be functional incontinence. This results from conditions such as a stroke, severe arthritis, or Alzheimer's. And that is all I've got for the urinary system.